We'll go ahead and call this special meeting of the Campbell City Council to order this morning for Tuesday, March 31st, 2026. And we'll start with roll call, please.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Hines.
Present.
Councilmember Scazola. Vice Mayor Bybee.
Present.
Mayor Furtado.
Here. We now move to public comment. This would be the time for anyone who would like to speak to the council on any item of business on today's agenda. We don't have anyone in the room. Anyone on?
No.
No one online, so there's no public comment. We now move to item number 3, which is new business. There is one item under this topic, and that is the city attorney structure. And so first I'll call on Councilmember Hines for a statement.
I just want to disclose, as I had done before on the prior topic on this, one of the examples that's given, the lawyer is Berliner Cohen. Berliner Cohen is an occasional client, a client of Novatech Services, and is disclosed on my 710. And also one of the lawyers at Berliner Cohen is the Novatech lawyer. And there are 200 lawyers, but one is. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll go to item 3.1, and I'll call on the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We're here today to consider the future structure of our city attorney's department. Is the staff report that you have in a memo that staff sent you back in December elicits some of the details of the discussion. But in essence, the discussion today is really relating to the structure of that arrangement. Currently, we have an arrangement that is both a contract and a city and employee arrangement. We refer to it as a hybrid model. And the city's operated under that model to have legal services from the city attorney for many years in that fashion, in which the hybrid model by contract allows for a certain amount of hours to be spent at a fixed cost under a retainer. And then those services that are required by the city attorney or his support staff up and above those retainer hours are billed on an hourly rate. In addition, the contract requires that the city treats the position as an employee for purposes of benefits and other employee-related costs. So that model is no longer really something that the League of California Cities is recommending. The staff report speaks to the guide that the League of California City puts out on retaining legal services. And the real suggestion is probably obvious to all of us. It's either a contract arrangement or an in-house counsel. And both of those models, as the staff report elicits, has several different considerations. And I don't know why this is not moving. And different costs associated with it. And so when we talk about those two arrangements, contract and in-house services, staff report sort of goes through a couple of main subject areas, one of which is the relationship and the partnership that you get with your city attorney, and they're different in those two models. And the staff report also goes into details on cost. And there's a lot of different numbers because with any arrangement, that attorneys have different areas of expertise. And so whether it's a contract or an in-house counsel, I think we're going to find ourselves in a position where we're going to need supplemental services in areas that the attorney isn't an expert in. Currently, we get those additional services in specialized litigation, such as Measure K, in the litigation that the attorney's office is managing on Measure K. And we also see that in workers' compensation, employment risk liability, issues that really come from human resources and managing our employees, and those costs are managed through my department in the city manager's department. So together, those are the costs that we've summarized here from a budgetary sense on this slide under the hybrid model. I think as we compare to other cities in these budget costs, we have to take this with a grain of salt, because anytime we have complex litigation that we can't anticipate, there's a wild card to this, and this can change dramatically based on that. And in fact, what we've seen at mid-year budget that the council just approved is we did amend those budgets both in the city attorney's area and in the city manager's department dealing with litigation. So these numbers are meant just broadly to understand what those costs line up, but they, as I said, could change dramatically based on litigation, either for us or for these other cities. Trying to highlight here, and I'm not going to read all of this, there's a lot on this chart, but we wanted to have one chart that summarized for you the major points of discussion, both under a contract and in-house counsel. So as you go down through these different rows, they're speaking to different service areas and different issues, and then from left to right, comparing in the middle column contract services, and in the rightmost column what we would describe as in-house counsel. That would be a full-time employee. And you could see the different comments on each of those areas in there. And then at the bottom, the very last row is a summary of what I was just mentioning, the cost both for the city attorney, for the retainer, for additional billed services, and for managed litigation outside of those costs. And then below that, the $174,000 is the legal costs budgeted for through my department for workers' compensation, employment risk, liability, and those other HR-related litigation costs. So total, those are what comprises of those. I would encourage us to be thinking about the relationship as much as the cost. And the reason I say that is because as we go through all of these numbers, it's really easy to mesh numbers. It's easy to look at actual costs versus budget costs. And it starts becoming a fruitless exercise, because those litigation and those outside costs, as I said before, can change dramatically. We can't control that. But what we can control is the level of service that we ask and the level of engagement that we want with our city attorney. I think from my perspective, it's safe to say that we've enjoyed a really positive relationship with the existing city attorney, and as a member of our executive team and a contributing member, as with all of our department heads. And I think, from my opinion, that outweighs the cost, because I think when we look at the cost, whether we contract or we do it in-house, I doubt that we're going to find that we're going to be able to save money over the existing relationship that we have now. It's very likely, no matter what cost model we choose, it could potentially be more expensive. But rather than trying to focus on those dollars, much of which we can't control because of litigation, is focusing on that relationship, the skills, the job set, the level of engagement that we would expect from the future city attorney, both from a council to a direct report level, because the city attorney does report directly to the council, but also with the exec team, that we get a relationship with the city attorney, whether it's contract or in-house, that has that level of engagement that all of the department heads need. And when I speak about that, I envision the council saying, what is it that staff really needs? What staff want out of this? And I think with any other position, we're a team, and the city attorney is a crucial function in that team, and that all the work that we do, whether it's in public safety or finance, or in the city manager's office or in community development, we're only as successful as we can effectively communicate among our departments and work outside of our silos. and partner with the city attorney to get concise, quick responses on issues that are really pertinent. Some of the areas that are increasingly time consuming include all of the recent changes in state law with regard to housing and land use. And we've seen those issues even come up recently with the council and questions of the community on some streets in our community with regard to the city's interpretation of some of those state laws, including Senate Bill 1123. And those demands that come to the city attorney's office that require resources to do adequate research and give council's recommendations, I think those become crucial. Not that everything has to be an emergency, but when things come up, to have enough resources in the city attorney's office to be able to help in those areas. And likewise, in the areas of public records, I think our clerk's office and our police department can attest that we've gotten a tremendous increase in the amount and the complexity and the time that it takes to fulfill public records requests. And the city attorney's office isn't there to do administrative work related to the public records request, but there is a burden on the city attorney's office to help advise legal issues with regard to what documents are public, where appropriate redactions should be occurred, helping flag city attorney client privileged information, and just advising staff and partnering in those areas as well. That's another area that's increasingly taking time. And then with that, certainly I'm here, and our chief, our finance director, our city clerk, and our assistant city manager are here to answer questions if you have them as it impacts us. And of course, our city attorney is here as well as a resource to help provide feedback and input if the council wants that on that as well. What we're hoping to get from the council today is beginning of this discussion. This really started some time ago when the city attorney let the council know that he was planning on retirement. And the council asked for the city manager's department to assist in helping pull together this so that we didn't find ourselves at the end of this year still grappling with the decision. And it's going to take time, no matter whether we do a contract and we go through an RFQ or an RFP for those services, or whether we hire in-house. We're going to have to go through a recruitment for one or many staff members to fulfill that role. So I was hoping today to begin that conversation publicly. And I've spoken with each council member and I've spoken with staff and got input, but this is the first chance together in a public setting where we can have these conversations. And if there's questions, I would be glad, if we can't answer them today, to come back and help fill in those blanks for the council on the information you need that's necessary to make that decision. And then ultimately, if not today, at a future discussion, get some direction from the council on which of those two paths you would prefer to proceed down. As we prepare our budgets, that will have an impact on those budget numbers, probably in not the total number, but in how those numbers are allocated throughout the budget document. So we will be flexible in preparing that based on council direction as we need. But that was the purpose for today and the information I wanted to share with the council. And I'll stop there and take questions from council and or feedback.
Thank you, Brian, for your presentation. So first I'll ask any of my colleagues if you have questions to ask.
Yeah, I did have a question on how would the difference between what we're currently set up with, which is a hybrid model, and a hired employee model, what would show up as the difference between those two?
I mean, we'd be moving numbers in the budget, and I don't think that's the important thing. Instead of contract services, you'd show that in personnel as a full-time equivalent, and you'd show it in employee costs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more in how do we articulate that structure from a working relationship with staff.
Okay.
And how you would articulate the qualities you would want in that future position. Both of those would we want to have a future discussion with the council to articulate. One would go into a job spec and a job advertisement. The other would go into an RFQ on how we would be weighing the qualities of a future contract, what was important to us, both from technical skills and probably people skills.
And I guess also then right now the hybrid is 100 hours under an employee. And then anything over that is a contracted rate.
Correct.
And so from in a point where there would be an employee, there'd be an expectation of the number of hours, and then there may be overtime hours associated with it.
There may be that, and there may be additional contract hours because, as I was saying, and with any attorney, you're going to find that they're probably not an expert in everything.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. I'm just talking about the individual.
Yeah, there wouldn't be overtime hours for that. There would be an exempt employee for the city attorney themselves.
Okay.
Their support
Okay.
staff, there may be
Yep.
some overtime for,
Yeah.
but we would be able to probably manage that.
Okay, it was the exempt. That really answers my question. Thank you.
Other questions? Sergio?
I just wanted to first follow up on Terry's first question. And please correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding. The difference between the two models, hybrid and employee, or our current model and an employee model may not be as large as some, I think, because we currently pay benefits, right? So it's not, in terms of the actual numbers, and you're right, I'd be moving it around on the budget, but the actual cost, all else being equal, we can't control how much litigation comes through, but would probably be pretty similar, right? Yeah, go ahead if you want to.
I think that's correct. I mean, you see that comparison chart, and it's hard when you start trying to compare apples with apples.
Right.
It's not really quite maybe the same type of apple. It's
Right.
still an apple, but maybe it's a golden delicious and not a red apple. But you get my point. Broadly, they're about similar.
Yeah, great. That's what I was trying to get at, because the memo and having the comparison points is very helpful, but it is kind of tricky to translate between different models. So that's helpful. Yeah, I guess that's my only question.
Thank you.
I
Ann?
have a question.
Yes.
Excuse me. So I'm not sure that you could really answer this adequately, but what would an applicant pool look like if we went through the in-house counsel route? So in other words, are there attorneys whose career path is basically to become a city attorney, an in-house city attorney, as opposed to working for a contract firm? And would our applicant pool be somewhat limited if depending on the person's career path?
Yeah, generally it would be a different career path. Normally, people who work in-house come from an in-house background, usually in a position in a larger city as a deputy city attorney somewhere. That you don't see a whole lot of moving back and forth between contract attorneys and in-house type attorneys. And most of the migration really runs from in-house to contract rather than the other way around.
Okay, thank you. And is there any data among the HR folks where other cities have recruited for an in-house attorney and what that applicant pool is? I mean, do they get a lot of applications? Do they get a handful? Is there a way to gauge that, or?
So just going by what the cities in our area do, and the most recent attorney search that I'm familiar with would be the city of San Jose. And my understanding was there were a couple of hundred applicants for that position. So it depends on what the city attorneys or the candidates' goals are and how big of a city they want to work for and what their previous experience. So there are folks out there interested in city attorney in-house positions.
I would just add to that it also depends on whether you're recruiting for the city attorney position as opposed to an assistant or a deputy type level. In San Jose's case, they have a lot of openings for deputies and assistants, recruiting for somebody who's specifically looking to be the city attorney. I would imagine the applicant pool is somewhat smaller.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question also. So if we were to lean in the direction of hiring an in-house attorney, then your recommendation would be to employ the services of a professional recruiter. And there are professional recruiters whose specialty is like recruiting for attorneys and so on. We'd specify some criteria that we'd like to have considered and so on. If we went with a hybrid model, then of course you're recommending that we would put out a request for proposal. And there again, we would sort of have to manage that. This is a question that I say we would have to manage that ourselves in terms of the criteria and so on. Okay, thank you. The other,
Yeah, so just a couple points of clarification. When you refer to hybrid, we're really talking not hybrid, just straight contract. It would be a contract, right? And then also we would probably do, and this isn't trying to split hairs, but we'd probably do a request for qualifications versus a request for proposals. We could do either, but generally speaking, when the qualifications are overriding consideration over cost, you would want to do an RFQ so you could articulate what those qualities are. Cost could still be a factor, but I think because of the personal relationship, we'd probably need to do an RFQ, but we would manage that ourselves.
the other question I had was under both models, for an in-house attorney, would that person sort of have the choice of bringing in whoever they kind of wanted for assistant attorney or associate attorney and staff versus a contract attorney who I'm guessing would probably then bring their own, definitely bring their own staff, if you will, with them. Am I?
So the latter part,
okay.
you are correct on. On the first part, the plan would be if we were going to hire in-house, that we would recruit and go through a process to hire the attorney first, and then to fill the staff that would work underneath that person, which we talk about different models. There could be additional staff hired under that. But we would follow our normal recruitment process for that staff. It wouldn't be up to the city attorney to bring in who they wanted. They would very much be like a department head and be able to provide influence on the hiring of those employees and make the final decision. But we would follow the normal recruitment process through HR and have an external panel rating those candidates. And then the attorney would then decide from the finalists which one they would want to select.
Okay, and then for the professional recruiter, that person would only be responsible for helping us find the principal attorney, and the decisions on any other associates and so on would come later, and not necessarily, of course, the responsibility of the professional recruiter.
Correct. That is correct, but you could, if you chose to have extra resources and bring more candidates into the pool, you could choose to have the recruiter participate and help with those other recruitments. Normally speaking, below the department head level, we would do that internally, but we would use a recruiter for the department head level, the city attorney position itself.
Any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, a couple of other questions came up with that discussion, but what's the extent of this department that you would anticipate we end up with? Right now, all of that is through the contracted law firm of bills. What would you expect the department to end up being? Is it a half-time person or full FTE? Or?
So if we went in-house, the recommended model that we're hearing and talking with my colleagues about would be a city attorney, and then a junior level, whether it's a deputy city attorney, an associate attorney. The staff report refers to as a junior level associate. the title of that could be dependent upon the city's needs and the skill set. But it would be the attorney plus that extra attorney support, whether it's a deputy or junior attorney, and then some administrative support, either through an administrative assistant or through a paralegal or some assistant.
So department of three?
It doesn't have to, that third one doesn't necessarily have to be full-time equivalent.
okay.
What we've seen in Los Gatos was an in-house city attorney arrangement. They originally had budgeted, the org chart had a city attorney and then a junior level attorney and then some paralegal support. But what they're actually budgeting for now is the attorney and sort of some split positions that they're splitting with other parts of the organization to support the administrative function. There's no junior attorney.
Yeah, okay.
And in those cases where you underfund what you know to be the appropriate structure, then you end up sort of with a hybrid model where you end up contracting out that additional support for the attorney's office anyway. So you end up moving towards that without a commitment to either in-house or a contract. You sort of left with that. And that's sort of the position of Los Gatos right now.
I didn't quite, you mentioned again the hybrid model. How would we end up in the hybrid model again?
Where
Or is it just a hybrid of
it'd just be not so much hybrid, but more supplemental. You end up supplementing your
Okay.
in-house services because you're not fully funding
Gotcha.
what you think is necessary because of budget,
All
but
right.
you end up supporting that with a contract.
But it's not with the department head. It's not the hybrid with the department head.
Correct.
It's
Right.
additional staff. Okay. And then on page 4, you list the fiscal year numbers. You know, a big jump in 2024 and 25. Was that essentially Measure K?
Measure K, it's some other litigation as well. There's some other things in there. I mean, there's a handful and the city attorney could speak to those, but they include working on gun restraining orders. They include working on some code enforcement cases and some drug abatement case, I think,
Okay.
as well. So if there's anything else, I'll let the city attorney jump in.
Yeah, and there was also one gun abatement case that we had to contract out to another law firm because I was conflicted in that it involved a public official.
Okay.
And we also have currently 2 very extensive Public Records Act requests that my office has to review the documents for, that it's taking up
Gotcha.
a lot of time.
So would anticipate some, it's not going to go back to 23, 24 levels. It's gonna continue.
Somewhere in between probably
Yeah.
is the reality.
Okay. And then one other question let's see, you talked about the approach from the supplemental city services from now until the end of the year. You were looking, I am assuming what you're talking about doing is having a transition with Liebert and Cassidy.
No, actually trying to work with Bill and his office to extend Victoria and some of those other junior attorneys that do supplemental services, so that if we find ourselves either doing an in-house model or a contract model, and we're just not quite there in the transition, come November, December this year, that we can continue to operate as a city and continue to have seamless city attorney services with people we're already comfortable with.
Which meaning that we would have some replacement in place as a department head, whether it's contract or
that we're
hire.
quickly moving down that path and close to being there. I don't know where we'll be at that, but I'm trying to hedge our bets a little bit. If things go slower than we anticipate,
Mhm.
that we have a backup plan to continue to have city attorney services. What we
Okay.
don't want to have happen is Bill retire at the end of December and then not have anything completely in place and be able to hit the ground running.
I might add, I'm going to call on her. I might add that there seems to have been, and I've asked Bill about this before, an increase in the number of requests for gun violence restraining orders, GVROs. That number seems to have increased. It's my impression from what you told me. And secondly, most recently, of course, we had that rather lengthy case of the receivership of that one piece of property. So that might be a factor as well.
And with regard to gun violence restraining orders, they do tend to vary somewhat. Currently, they're kind of leveling off somewhat from where they have been. Initially, we had like a dozen of them right off the bat. Now you see maybe a half dozen ongoing at any given time.
Thank you. Ann?
So Brian, you mentioned that the contract process would require either an RFP or an RFQ. Is based on, and the RFQ would be based on the would be based on the qualifications. Is that the qualifications of the firm? Is it the qualifications of the attorney that the firm is proposing to serve the city?
I would think it would be both. And in part, I wouldn't discount price, cost 100%. Cost is a factor. I don't know that it would be my suggestion. It's not the primary factor, but it is a contributing factor as well. And in an RFQ, you could still ask for price, negotiate price, but be weighing heavily your decision on those qualities, both of the attorney that you're actually getting here and the qualities of the firm and what that brings the city as far as breadth of experience in areas maybe the attorney doesn't have experience, but someone in their firm does have experience in.
But how is the individual determined that the attorney who's representing the firm? How does that person become our city attorney?
Maybe I can jump in there. Normally, the firm proposes somebody that they want to see as representing them as the city attorney. That is the normal process.
And would the term of the contract be unlimited? Would we, I mean, similar to some of our consultant contracts, like with our auditor, it's, we renew for two or three times and then do another RFQ. Would that apply here, or is that a possibility that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, all of those are possibilities. Typically, it's an open-ended position that somebody who is serving generally at the pleasure of the council. Sometimes they include some kind of what's the right word, where you get paid if you're terminate severance amount, something similar to that.
And how are those services evaluated by the city? Is there some evaluation criteria? After 6 months, we say this isn't really working out. How do we mitigate that? Is it?
You can include all of those. It depends on what the desire of the council is. The term of the contract could be whatever length you feel is appropriate, depending on the response to the RFQ and the qualifications. So if you want a period of time to consider and review and kind of take a step back and look at how the year has gone, or you can make it 6 months. It really is all open for negotiation, and how often you come back and evaluate the services can be annual, biennial, whatever you determine. Okay. So you can put a sort of soft end date on it, so you make sure that evaluation happens.
Thank you.
Thank you for the, yes.
I just had one follow-up, and Bill was hoping to get your input, just what, I think the public records request workload is important. Do you have any input as to the staffing, just trends you see in that area, especially as you're talking with other cities? Do you think that the conversations we're having are in line with what the need is that you see in those areas, or any other input? It's
kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, we can't predict. I just want to make sure that we're
You're
considering.
talking about workload in general? Is that the crux of your question?
Well, I'm focusing on the public records request because it's so voluminous, but I just want to make sure that the conversations we're having generally seem in line with what the projected workload would be.
Well, right now with the environment in Sacramento, you're seeing a heavily increasing workload, particularly in the area of land use and housing. I doubt that will continue forever, but I suspect it will continue for a number of years forthcoming. And I'll just add, one of the advantages of going with a contract is that the services available are flexible and can flex with as the workloads go up and down, whereas in-house you have more of a fixed amount of services available before you end up contracting out again.
And Brian, for the other cities that we looked at, did we try to break down how much? I guess this is captured in some of the amounts, but that baseline level versus how much they still need to contract out, even if they have in-house. Does that make sense? That's included in those numbers.
Yeah, this is what they had budgeted.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're over budget, we didn't dig that deep, but these are budgeted numbers.
Okay.
And I don't know if those numbers actually just include city attorney services or whether they also include all of the outside counsel services.
Yeah, from the budget perspective, we've included the numbers that are listed under the city attorney's budget item.
Yeah.
So it would assume that any litigation they would manage, but it probably does not include any litigation that's managed outside of that.
I think this makes perfect sense as a baseline, but I think those numbers are something I'd want to get a better understanding of, just so we know whatever option we go with, what we're signing up for. Because we could have the expectation it would be in line with this, and then there's $500,000 contract services that some of our peers are seeing. I don't expect it'll be that dramatic, but I just think we have to do our due diligence. But okay, that's helpful.
I have another question. I keep thinking of things. So right now with the structure that we have, the oversight of the city attorney is by the council and appointed by the council. With a contract, how would that be handled? Who would oversee that? Would it be staff, or would it still be council? And how does that dynamic work?
So I would suggest, unless the council believes otherwise, we would keep it similar to what we have now, that would report directly to the council, just as if we do now. And be my suggestion, that we do an annual review. The council would perform an annual review just as we do now.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep that relationship the same, unless the council has strong feelings in a different direction.
And I would just add that the only cities I know that where the city attorney does not report directly to the council are cities in which the city attorney is elected, of which I think there are only 2 or 3 left in the state.
So in those cities, Bill, the evaluation then would still be done somewhat how we conduct our annual evaluation of you. Is that how most cities do that?
I mean, it varies from city to city, but something similar to that.
Okay, seeing no other questions. For purposes of the record, I'll take public comment. Again, there doesn't appear to be anyone in the council chambers that wishes to speak on this matter. Anyone online? No one's online. Okay, so I'll close public comment. And Brian, subject to your recommendation or approval, if you'd like any of this, wanted to invite any of your staff to make some comments, we could, or we can just move on with our discussion.
Our staff is here and they're willing to participate. I think I've covered the areas in particular. I think with our public safety, it was in the areas of public records and the assistance in that. We spoke to that. Anyone, I'm looking over there to staff. Did I miss anything? I think we're good. Thank you.
Since PD is such a, almost half of our perspective. I'd be interested in any perspective that, Chief, that you might have on what put you on the spot, what works better for you.
Yeah, happy to answer your questions and give my perspective. We've had a great relationship with Bill, our current city attorney. I can say from our perspective on the workload and the burdensome task, especially related to PRAs, the idea of having somebody in-house 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, available to have those conversations and to provide the support is much more appealing to us. I think when we look at the dynamic of the exec team and the ability to deal with issues and not let them get prolonged, having that ability to have somebody in-house would provide an extreme benefit. I think additionally, over the years, there have been other things that have come up, whether it's related to ordinances or updating ordinances that really isn't within our purview, that has fallen on staff to perform. So having somebody available to give that support would be much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we return the matter here to the council for further discussion or recommendation. We basically have two potential models to follow. One would be for the council to consider the process of hiring an in-house attorney. Secondly, of course, as you know, would be for us to continue the somewhat current arrangement of contract attorneys and legal services. So I guess if I understand correctly, first of all, my own comment is it appears from the documents we've received and the discussions that I've had, or that you may have had too, that since it's the staff that primarily deals with the attorney more than the council, and there's probably over a period of time a greater turnover of council members than there is staff and city managers and things of that nature. I would surely like to pay attention to staff recommendations and what they feel the needs are of the city, since they're here every single day. But that's just my personal opinion. But in any event, any comments, or does anyone have considerations or potential recommendations for which route we should follow?
I could start.
Yes.
I do think it's important that the next city attorney be a full-fledged member of the executive team. We've been fortunate that in the current hybrid arrangement, we've had that. I would like to get a little bit more information, the numbers about actuals versus budget for some of the peer agencies that we looked at that did have an in-house model. But that said, I think we're unlikely to realize too much of a dramatic cost savings one way or the other. So I lean at this point towards in-house based off what we've heard. But I'd like to continue vetting that to make sure that we have a realistic expectation of what the costs would be as a baseline, while understanding that the actual number will fluctuate depending on litigation and other needs. But that's my leaning at this point.
I'll go first and then defer to the vice mayor and mayor. There was a comment that you made in page 7, where the city attorney is a check on city administration. I think that's very important to maintain. So I think that it's we want to be able to have that check. We, as myself as a council member, want to be able to rely on legal counsel for the check on the city administration. From the standpoint of the which approach I also I concur with Councilmember Lopez, primarily from the standpoint that we're probably looking at a 5 to 10 year relationship. And we'd like to have a 5 to 10 year relationship with with any department head and a city attorney, or how long is it, Bill? 30? 30 would be great. It's 40. 40 would be even better. There's just a tremendous continuity associated with that. So I think that we want to be able to have that. I don't believe that we could really rely on that from a contracted attorney standpoint. So that's really why I look at in an in-house. Excuse me. The workload is certainly going to be there. So it's not like we're going to have less than 120 hours worth of work for a city attorney in there. So I think we're definitely 120 hours a month. So we're definitely looking at a workload more of a staffing exempt employee. The one point that I always a lot of corporations and I've always adhered to is a contract for hire. So I think it's very difficult to measure the perception, the way that a particular new member would interact right at the get-go. And if there's some way to structure it where it's a contract for hire for 6 months or whatever, or that would, to me, be more amenable, because if you get somebody in, they have done a tremendous amount of work to investigate that, and that there's a dynamic that doesn't match. It's very disruptive to swap out, not swap out, but as an employee to make a change on that. It's going to be easier if it's a contracted employee under a contract to hire relationship. So I'm not sure if that ends up being a hybrid again, but I think having that relationship of being able to know that we can go to that person, every department head feels that they've got that ability. I'm not sure that you can get that understanding really in an employee search right from the get-go. Thank you.
So to me, there are pros and cons with both models. For me, I'm leaning towards the in-house solution, and for a couple, three or four main reasons. Primarily because of the in-house availability of being on site 5 days a week. I also believe that the person would be more engaged as an executive team member and really feel part of the team, and would be more vested in the city's interest. And then for continuity, I think it's important to have that, as Councilmember Hines mentioned, that it's nice, would be great to have somebody here for a long period of time. 5 years doesn't seem too long. 10 years doesn't seem too long, but it would be nice to have somebody here for 20 years. With the contract, I think there's the main plus there is that there's more depth within the firm to be able to provide backup services, or if the city attorney isn't able to attend a meeting or whatever, and our city attorney staff couldn't make a meeting, there would be someone to fill in. But there's always, as we've seen, there's our ability to go outside for legal counsel on special issues such as Measure O. So we would retain that flexibility. So I'm leaning towards the in-house model.
Thank you. I am also more in favor of hiring an in-house attorney. I think, Terry, getting to your very first comment when you were making comments, I think we could probably structure that in such a way that the council would still retain, that the attorney would still report directly to the city council as it does now. That would achieve a certain level of independence and so on. I think it's going to be difficult to sort of estimate costs beyond what the staff has already provided us, just because things are flexible. Costs go up and down, and I'm just not sure that we could get to any further level of refinement on costs or make good estimates in that regard. I would certainly think that if we went to an in-house attorney and then hired a professional recruiter, we could work with that recruiter and sort of spell out some of the things that we're most concerned about. And that would help guide that person in creating the brochure or the information, recruitment information, as well as guide in the selection process to make recommendations to us. Of course, it would still be our decision. But those are my thoughts. And I didn't know if the council, based on everything you've heard so far, is ready to make any kind of definitive recommendation or action, or you feel that you need to discuss it further.
Just a point of clarification, Mayor, was there a leaning that you had, whether it's in-house or contract?
Oh, definitely. I'm in-house.
Okay.
I would like to hire a full-time attorney.
Well, with that, I think it's unanimous across the council on we're requesting staff to move forward with an in-house. I don't know if we need to make a motion or anything on that. Or
So I can do it one or two ways. I'm glad to take a motion to get formal direction from the council. I hear a few more questions that we could probably answer. And if the council is leaning towards that model, we could take the information and the feedback today, flush that out a little bit more, come back to you with a schedule and an idea of what the recruitment process would look like and what our schedule would be to bring us into a hiring position for that. And then bring back a discussion of whether or not, based on that timeline, we should be considering some transitory contract with Bill's existing arrangement to carry us through the end of the year. I think we didn't really get to that point, and that's 9 months from now, so it seems so long from now, but I wanted to just broach that based on the schedule, and we'll project out if that seems appropriate to the council, and then we'll get some more information on Council Member Lopez's question about additional costs, mitigation costs in those other cities up and above actual budgeted costs to see what their experiences are. We can dig a little bit deeper there as well.
Although you wouldn't know for sure in answering this question at the present time, but do you anticipate or do you believe that if we moved ahead with this model of hiring a professional recruiter, that person could be recruited, hired, and the criteria developed, and then, that we would be successful by the end of roughly by the end of the year or slightly before that?
Yes, I think that's completely reasonable if we continue to go down that path without too much delay. I would be glad to suggest, I think part of that process is how the council wants to hire that recruitment and the level of engagement the council wants to have on that recruitment, including whether the council wants to appoint an ad hoc committee to work on such things as the interview panel. If the whole council wants to be involved, I think we have to start at some point, if not the next discussion, the very next, start talking about those things, because that will help define that timeline. But to answer your question as succinctly as possible, yes, I think it's possible. Yes, I think we can get a recruiter on board and do that recruitment by the end of this year, but I don't think we can waste too much more time.
Okay. Well then, I'll phrase this properly here. First of all, basically then you think that if we move ahead with your recommendation that you just made, no further action would be required of us today. You would just, by general consensus, you would move ahead and come back to us again with a more definitive offer. My second point is, if we go in the direction that the attorney would still continue to report to the council directly, then I believe the entire council should be involved in the interview process. I don't think we would, well, I shouldn't be speaking for everyone, but I'm thinking that since that responsibility would come to the council, the entire council should be involved in the interview process for the professional recruiter and also for the eventual selection and hiring of an attorney should we get to that point.
And I think from a process perspective, we'll make those assumptions based on that feedback. And if the council wants to pivot, you always can do that, but we'll prepare a timeline based on that suggestion.
Yes. Yeah.
I would just add one caveat to that. I also think it's important to include our exec team or some members of the exec team in that process as well to get their feedback. After all, the staff is going to be working with this person day in and day out. And I think there needs to be some type of a rapport and relationship that they are able to weigh in on and provide some feedback for the council in whatever decision is made as to who's appointed.
That's a good point. And I think that if the process works with a professional recruiter, that person would suggest a number of candidates that they recommend we interview, and we would make a selection of which ones we wanted to interview, and we might do that, but at the same time, we would have a second panel independent of us, where it'd be just the staff from their perspective, and asking and questions, and then perhaps making a recommendation to us if they agree, the top 2 or 3 people, and then we do final interviews or something along that lines.
You could also have the recruiter meet with each department head
Sure.
to learn what's important to them and what their priorities are. And those would be taken into consideration as well in that review process.
Okay. So, yes.
I really agree with all the comments that have been made. I also just wanted to express my support for what Councilmember Hines said, which is that having some kind of flexibility during the transition period, I think would be really important. And so however you want to structure that and recommend, I'll look for staff recommendation to bring that back. But I think that's important as we make this major transition for the city.
Okay. Well, subject.
Just one more comment that I really want to make sure that staff has a solid direction. I've heard a solid direction from council, and I just want to make sure that 9 months is going to go like that. So let's figure out a way to really make sure that you can move forward as quickly as possible. In the interview process, frankly, from my standpoint, I don't need to see the 100 resumes. I'll take the department head and staff recommendation down to the recommended 2 or 3.
Okay, so subject to any further comment or disagreement, I'm assuming that we will just go ahead and request that the city manager come back to us with a more definitive recommendation answering some of the questions that were raised. And at that point in time, presumably, we'd make a decision as to exactly how we proceed. Is that agreeable? Okay. I don't think so. So if there's no further comment, I will, first of all, thank everyone for their participation and recommendations and the staff reports and so on that we've had up until this time, and the recommendations from your staff, from our staff as well. And thank you. And I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.